Hello and welcome. This is Mouse Gunner, and we're back with some more Space Engineers, continuing on with the large ship build that I continued or picked up quite recently after a long layover. And in the last video, I discussed some of the changes that were happening. A lot of those changes were bringing the ship systems up to a lot of the more current updates, using some of the newer ship systems that have been added since I stopped playing the game. Which, by the way, the reason I stopped playing the game was to wait for more updates, so that served me well. In any case, since the last video, I did a live stream where I did some building. If you caught that live stream, I'm happy that you joined me, and it was quite a bit more fun than I thought it was going to be initially. I'm still pretty new to streaming on Twitch, and the experience is still quite a bit of a learning experience for me. But essentially, I just went through the building because I figured I'm gonna do this building anyway. So while I'm at it, I might as well, stream it if I'm going to be taking a couple hours of building, and that's roughly how long the stream went. It was about a couple hours long. So there have been a number of changes. First off, I finished off a lot of the changes that I talked about in the last video. Essentially pressurizing the entirety of the ship. I finished up the spine of the ship, so we see that kind of more or less completed. So pretty much every room in the ship outside of the crawl spaces underneath the ship is now pressurized and supplied with oxygen. I also added some turrets on the top on the spine here, as I kind of imagined doing. Now, I'm not sure if this is the final configuration of the way the ship's going to go, but this is kind of more or less a kind of rough draft of things. Now, I'm probably going to focus more on these Gatling turrets than anything else, mostly with the objective in mind of shooting down missiles or fighters that are threats to the ship. Predominantly probably incoming, guided missiles or unguided missiles that are coming. That's the main purpose of these. I also have a couple of these missile turrets as well, mostly in the center of the ship to kind of give us a broadside armament. And that's pretty much as the armament goes. I also added in these oxygen farms. I'm not exactly sure of their placement, but I thought it would be a good idea to include these, as I know it's not going to probably supply much of the oxygen for the ship without other supplies, but maybe it will cut down the resource consumption of the ship to supply oxygen to the ship. So that's kind of the idea. I'll probably add more of these as well. Now, I haven't added anything to the bottom of the ship, but you can expect the turrets on the bottom of the ship as well. I won't need to do a spine structure like I did on the top, though, because of the more the crawl spaces that exist on the bottom of the ship that don't really exist on the top of the ship. So that spine really isn't necessary to build. More or less, it already exists underneath the crawl space of the ship. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about some of the other things that went on. As I said, I pressurized up most of the ship. So let's go ahead and look in on the ship and see a lot of those ship systems in place. And maybe I can discuss some of my plans for the future as we go through the ship. So I only have essentially this one control right now to get into the ship. And we have the left hangar door and the left interior door that we need to open. And while I'm here, I might as well, we'll wait for that. So this is pressurized. We can see the air coming out there just as that was open. So I have a vent in the back, and I have two vents up here. These are supplied from underneath the ship. And for the most part, you can see the vent there. I tried to close off a lot of the vents so you couldn't really see the crawl space underneath, and also to create a vacuum, seal off a vacuum, because the crawl space at the moment is open to space. Also, if there was a breach in the hull, I want to have those secondary seals so that if that crawl space is breached, it doesn't invalidate all of the seals of the ship. So that's another reason why I closed off a lot of these vents. Alright, so if we come up through here, we enter our main large airlock, which is also pressurized. And the areas that are going to be depressurized quite often and we get knocked off our feet. I'm kind of not that big of a fan of being knocked off our feet every time you lose pressure. I think if you're in a gravity, that really shouldn't knock you into your jetpack, but that's alright. In any case, as you see, because we have two vents here, this room gets filled up with oxygen pretty quickly. And as I was saying, the rooms that get depressurized often, like this hangar or this airlock, are going to get supplied with oxygen pretty quickly so that you don't have to worry about waiting too long for that. The only area that isn't pressurized is this room right here, but I figure if either this room or the room next door are pressurized, it doesn't really take this room all that long to fill up with oxygen from those other rooms, considering that it is only a one block space room. So it fills up with oxygen pretty quickly, and if we just switch over to the tab and close this door off, we could probably see, oh, it does say none oxygen. That's interesting. So we come in here, it says hi. Come in here, it says none. Okay, so so it did fill up there, because it went from none to high. I'm not exactly sure 100% how this works, but I would assume that this room would get filled up with oxygen pretty quickly if you leave that door open, but I may be wrong in that, and it might need redressing. Any case, one sore spot I kind of have is the bridge area of the ship was a little bit more challenging to pipe up. Oh, I didn't remember piping this area up. I think I did that accidentally, assuming that there was a room here. But there isn't. So we have at least 4 vents in this main hallway, which is good. If there was a breach, this pretty large area would fill up pretty quickly. So as much as I did that accidentally, that's actually a good thing. But this bridge area over here was a little bit more difficult to pipe up, as the crawl spaces were pretty limited. So initially, it wasn't that difficult to essentially oxygenate this room and this room. But this room was a little bit more challenging, as there isn't really a crawl space above this area, above this wall here. This is essentially exterior wall. So this is kind of an eyesore for me. This is how I had to supply the bridge. Now, there might be another way I could do this to not have to have this kind of exposed ducting or piping that I'm not that big of a fan of. I really honestly think this is an eyesore. So this is the one thing that I have set up that I really am not that big of a fan of. But, this room here, which I still haven't decided what some of these rooms are supposed to be for, but maybe this is the captain's office or something. This is oxygenated, as we can see up there. There's that vent. But yeah, the way the bridge is hooked up and the way that I'm piping the oxygen to the bridge, I'm not so sure I'm a big fan of at the moment. So that might be redesigned later in the future. But at the moment, this is pretty much the way. So we only have one vent that comes in here. Now I may do something maybe with an oxygen vent coming up here in the floor back here. Maybe that would be a good idea. Something like that. I'm really thinking about kind of redesigning this area. I'm just not sure how much crawl space wise we have room, because this part of the ship is pretty compact and not a whole lot of thought was given to crawl spaces, so that is kind of a problem with the bridge area. But the whole rest of the ship is pretty much oxygenated. Through the top spine, we have all of the upper deck crew quarters, which were previously not pressurized, are now pressurized. And it's pretty much done the same way. We have this vent up here on the ceiling that is supplied through the spine, as well as these vents here. There's one here, and there's also one at the end of the hall. But if we enter one of these rooms, we see much like we had out there. We have a vent that's essentially in the middle of the room here that's piping up oxygen from that above ductwork. And that's more or less it. As I said, all the rooms are supplied with oxygen now. We have the bay doors are now more or less, or the bay areas are more or less completed. We have the completion of both the left and right side of the ship. And that's more or less it. Now, Some of the areas I'm thinking about adding, and this is something that has been kind of bothering me for a while now, is a lot of the whole point of the way I'm designing this ship is I'm trying to make this a practical ship. It has crew quarters, something that I feel like is left out a lot of times on other people's ship builds. They might have a very, pretty ship exterior-wise, but oftentimes the interiors of the ship are kind of haphazardly done because the ship's constructed in a very modular way, or essentially more care is taken to the outside of the ship. Or if there is more complete interiors, as I said, you don't really have thoughts given for crew quarters. I have the ability of, I think total we have five, 5 crew quarters. Times 2, so that's 10 crew rooms, and you could probably double bunk some of these rooms. So technically, I have a max capacity of 40 crew, but honestly, with officers' rooms maybe only being a single berth, that would probably go down from there. But let's say it's round about 30-ish, give or take a few crew on this ship. Let's say 36 crew, somewhere around there. In any case, you have roughly around that kind of crew capacity. Something I don't see on many other ship designs, the allotment for crew berths, and if there are crew berths, it's usually very limited, maybe 1 or 2 rooms for that purpose. But there are a couple things that I'm missing from that. First off, there is no mess area. And that is one of the things that's bothering me the most out of my ship design. I have no mess area. So one thing I'm thinking about doing is there's a pretty extensive or quite a bit of space below the deck of the ship with a crawl space underneath here. So I'm thinking about cutting through the hull here and building a mess area on a third deck below the main 2 decks. Maybe a couple mess halls or recreational areas. I think that would be a good idea. Another thing I don't really have allotment for, obviously, is bathroom facilities. But honestly, if you remember a lot of science fiction type things like the original Star Trek or even Star Trek Next Generation, do you ever remember seeing a toilet facility ever? It's just one of those things in television. You never really, unless it's like a real modern day house, you never really see in science fiction settings most of the time a toilet facility. So as much as that is overlooked in this ship, that is something that is often overlooked in science fiction. But that is something that we could definitely try and redress. Whether or not we use toilet facilities that are like essentially individual toilet facilities for each room, which would be kind of problematic, or if we do toilet facilities for, just that are essentially a general ship-wide, like, public restroom. Well, I'll have to see. Honestly, a lot of the reason I haven't done a lot of these things, and if you've seen so far with the way I've been building my ship, I'm not using mods. I know there's a lot of mods out there for this game. This has, quite a bit of mod support. So those mods are out there. I could very easily find a toilet mod, for instance, to get a toilet to use, but I'm kind of waiting until this game's more complete to really delve into mods. So at the moment, I'm only designing things with what's in the game at the in its current build, non-mod wise. Once the game is finally released, whenever that happens, I'll think about adding in mods. So if you're curious why I'm not adding in a lot of mods, a lot of the reason I'm not is because I don't want to constantly have to worry about compatibility issues, whether another update coming out is going to break one of my mods, or whether one of the mods is going to interfere with a new update, or what have you. So waiting until the game's more or less finished before I delve into mods is probably, in my opinion, the best way to go about things. Because it's kind of, a big waste of time for me to design the ship around a lot of modded systems that are in the future not going to work. Which is another reason why I kind of put off time here, and there was this long layover in between me doing this series. And that's chiefly because I was concerned about, running into a wall where I would build around what ship systems existed, spending a lot of time to doing that, and then find that an update invalidates a lot of what I did. For instance, these bays. I essentially initially used a rotor door to close this area off, where they come up with airtight doors that serve what I want to do a lot better. So all the work I did in setting up those rotor doors, although it's not that extensive time, was essentially wasted. And that multiplies over a lot of ship systems. So the ship is nowhere near complete, and a lot of the reason it's not complete is it's being left open to future updates. So I hope you're patient with me as far as that goes. I did notice, and this thought never really occurred to me, but one person in the live stream mentioned that this looked like a penis. And honestly, if you look at it, it really kind of does. So, as much as that was not intentional, I ended up making this thing look like a penis. So, until we can think of another better name for this, or the overall shape of the ship changes in the future, I think we're going to have to dub this the USS Patriotic Penis until we think of a better name. But in any case, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This is Mouse Gunner, signing out.